Things are tense on the shore of the Sanctuary Isle. Exeter, Nadia, and Skink stand assembled, a pair of high-tech binoculars held to Exeter's face. He doesn't like it. Exeter offers the binoculars to Nadia, but she shakes her head instead. No thanks, don't need them. Skink does take them when they are offered, though, and we can see ships through them on the horizon. Are they Raven ships? Exeter remarks that Court has been king for barely a week. He isn't nearly ballsy enough for an attack on them so soon. Skink isn't sure who they are, but he is sure that with Ethan and Ashley in the Heron Lands, the Sanctuary Isle is suddenly very vulnerable. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 18.17 of Scion, Dangers Unseen. Issue 29 picks up shortly after our last issue, which saw Ethan suggest a little vacation to Ashley. They've spent their whole relationship either on the run or fighting for their lives. While they are certainly attracted to each other, are they really in love with one another? Is this a relationship that could last a lifetime? Well, they're hoping to find out, and Ethan is also hoping to win his family over too. His brother Kai was still a little pissy when they last parted, and we have been shown that Ethan's family means a lot to him. Kai's anger probably bothers him, and so much of his life is a big unknown right now, so Ethan is probably searching for some comfort. I am a bit concerned about leaving Exeter, Nadia, and Skink in charge of the Sanctuary Isle in their absence. Like, sure, they've shown themselves to be trustworthy and capable allies, but as leaders of a new nation? From the perspective of a newly freed member of the lesser races, I don't know if I would be willing to trust the former bounty hunter who hunted his own kind, Ethan's oldest best friend, and I mean, I haven't trusted Nadia since we met her, so I don't know why anybody would trust her, but I get it. To everybody else, she probably seems really sweet. But can she lead a nation? Come on, that's a big question. And I suppose we're going to find out how well they do. Just as a heads up, this scene is the second time that Nadia hasn't needed binoculars to see ships on the horizon. Maybe she's got some kind of high-tech contacts on. We saw her using a small computer last issue when she sent her report to Tigris, so she clearly has access to technology that we haven't seen elsewhere in Avalon, so I would argue that it's possible. We catch up with Ethan and Ashley in the Grove of the Heron Palace. The Grove is the garden area that is dedicated to fallen Heron heroes, like Ethan's brother, Artur. We once saw Ethan and Kai here before Ethan left for the Raven Lands in his attempt to kill Bron. Ashley comments that it's beautiful, that it has a real sense of peace to it. Ethan has always liked the Grove. It serves as a reminder that the spirits of the fallen live on around us. The Ravens have a similar tradition, Ashley comments, but they erect statues instead. They always seemed so cold to her, not vibrant and alive like this. They stop near a particular tree. This one was planted in honor of Artur. Ashley is embarrassed? Chagrined? He was the one who was... Ethan finishes her thought. He was the one who was killed at Point Corday, yes. Ashley says that she's sorry. Sorry that she never got the chance to meet him. Sorry that what happened to him happened. She closes her eyes for a moment. This was a bad idea. She knew it. How could she expect Ethan's family to accept her when her family has harmed them this badly? She would rather be in battle than face them like this. Taking her hand, Ethan smiles. You know, the last time he visited her family, he was thrown in the dungeon. This is going to be fine. His family is, well, they're here. The camera spins, revealing the rest of Ethan's family behind them. King Dane and Prince Kai are pictures of restraint, standing stoically. Queen Mariella's hands are clasped before her chest, her excitement and relief at Ethan's return clear. And Princess Elena runs to Ethan, hugging him tight. "It's about time you came home," she says. Ethan returns the hug. He isn't quite sure that this is home anymore, but it is good to see her. He reintroduces Ashley, and Elena says that they're pleased to have her. Mariella greets Ethan next, also hugging him. She wasn't sure that she would ever see him again. And come on, Mom, Ethan says. I told you I'd be fine. Dane claps Ethan on the shoulder. It's good to have him near again. And then we have Kai. And the brothers greet each other fairly coldly. There is clearly something hanging between them, which has been established previously. Ethan then introduces his mother officially to Ashley, who immediately apologizes for her family's actions. She knows that Mariella must, but Mariella quickly scoops up Ashley's hands. She tells her that Ashley has nothing to apologize for. She isn't going to judge her just because of who her family is, especially if Ethan is fond of her. Ashley almost looks like she has tears in her eyes and says a thank you. Dane then says that dinner has been laid out. They should head into the palace. They must be hungry after their journey here. So that went pretty well, right? Elena has been the most understanding and cool of the Heron family with Ethan's choices, and so her being the most exuberant to greet him makes a fair amount of sense. Mariella, having a few more years of decorum training and queenly responsibilities, holds back though. Kai is cold and standoffish, which isn't shocking, and Dane seems to be acting a bit more like he was back in issue 25, after Ethan separated the fleet but before his fight with Bron. Dane is a bit standoffish, but he seems fine. Obviously, whatever happened in the garden at the end of last issue didn't seem to bother him too much. Or maybe something did happen, and that's why he's acting weird. Maybe he's trying to hide something. In any case, the thing that I love most here is Ashley's reaction to Queen Mariella's emotional pardon, I guess I'd call it. Like Ethan, Ashley is someone who lives in her own head a lot, and she puts a lot of pressure on herself. She was clearly uncomfortable with what this visit could be, like the Heron family hating her for Bron's actions. And remember, Ashley's family was a harsh yet tender father, a jerkish a-hole of an older brother, and his younger sidekick brother. The Raven Royal family might not be the most well-balanced family that we've ever met, and that's kind of what Ashley was expecting here. And instead, she gets kindness and forgiveness and compassion. I never realized before this scene that I felt bad for Ashley before, but evidently I did. Seeing her being accepted by Ethan and now his family is oddly cathartic and very satisfying. As we join the dinner, Ethan is filling his family in on some of the challenges that the Sanctuary Isle is facing. They would still like to pursue the abolishment of slavery in the East, but the Sanctuary Isle is taking in more people every day. Housing them all has become their main concern, as the island wasn't built to house people permanently. They're not only renovating the current structures, but they're also having to build new homes because winter is coming, as some would say. It's difficult, Ethan says, but Ashley helps keep him in good spirits. Ashley gives him a bit of a side-eye at this. Ethan fails to mention that someone tried to assassinate him. It wasn't that bad, Ethan says casually. Besides, the sigil healed his wounds. He's fine, it's no biggie. It's clear that he doesn't want his family to worry. You were fine this time, Dane says, but what happens next time? Or the time after that? You need to be ready for this kind of thing if you plan to continue this foolishness, son, he says. And that throws Ethan. Foolishness? But he thought that his father supported his decision. That was what he said. Don't confuse tolerating your decision for supporting it, Dane replies. I've always thought that your place was here with us. And now Ethan looks visibly hurt. But when we were at the shore, you gave me advice, he says. I don't understand, Dad. This isn't like you. Kai jumps in. What did you expect, Ethan, for the family to just embrace you back after you turned your back on them? He has always seen Ethan's disloyalty as just that, and it is a relief to him that Father finally sees it too. I have never turned my back on this family, Ethan argues, but Kai isn't listening. Oh yeah? You think loyalty means bringing the sister of our brother's murderer to dinner? Oh, fuck.
No swearing.
Kai! Dude! Ashley isn't taking that without defending herself, though. She steels herself and takes a deep breath and says that she is not her brother. Ethan also defends her, saying that Ashley has never done anything to harm them. She's actually saved his life several times. Oh, sure, Kai says, so you could go off and canoodle together while we fight your war. I never meant to start the war, Ethan says, both brothers now standing at their seats. I did everything that I could to avoid the war, and I am the one who stopped it, thank you. What you stopped is being part of this family, Kai shouts. The only brother that I have is lying dead in the crypt, and Mariella finally loses her patience and tells them both to stop. Now she is standing as well, the picture of contained fury. She knows that she raised her sons to be better than this. This is Ethan's homecoming, and they are grown men. Whatever problems they have, she expects them to put it aside and to drink to each other's health. She raises a glass and a toast, and the rest of the table does so as well. Except for Kai and Ethan. For a minute, Ethan raises his goblet. He doesn't want to fight with Kai. To your health, brother. Mariella looks at Kai. Kai? The older brother finally raises his goblet, and then he pours it out. He chucks the cup onto the table and storms off. Okay, so that was pretty emotionally charged for a scene. Obviously, the stuff with Kai is the star of the show, but we've seen that Kai had a problem with Ethan before. That's not exactly a new development. What is new is Dane's turnaround on Ethan. He was pretty supportive of Ethan's aims when he was on the Sanctuary Isle. Was that really advice given through gritted teeth? Dane certainly sounded like he was reluctant back in issue 27. Not only did he tell Ethan that he was proud of him, but he also assured him that Kai would warm up to this situation, implying that he wasn't upset like Kai was. And last issue, Dane told Mariella that he was more proud of Ethan now than he thinks he would have been if Ethan had remained in the West, implying that he likes that he left. To see him be so suddenly dismissive of Ethan's goals and feelings is quite shocking. And to have him agree with Kai, well, that's just worse. And he doesn't do anything to try to calm this fight between them down. He just sits there in quiet silence while Mariella does her best to salvage this dinner, and it doesn't really work, but she tries. Dane just sits there. Something is definitely going on with him. As the evening wears on, Ethan and Ashley have separated. We and Princess Elena find Ashley on the upper ramparts of the palace. She says that Ethan needed some time to think, so she's trying to give him some space. That dinner was kinda rough. Elena is actually happy to find Ashley alone. It finally gives them a chance to talk. And to Elena, Ashley seems kind of different. This scene is intercut with Ethan, who is back at the Grove, and a conversation that he has with Kai. Ethan is immediately relieved to see his brother. He didn't want to leave things badly between them. Kai looks around. He didn't expect to find Ethan here. Ethan was thinking about Artor. The Grove reminds him of him. You know, if you want to honor Artor's memory, then you should visit his tomb, Kai suggests. He goes there often himself. But Ethan actually hasn't gone back to it, has he? No, not since they buried him. Ethan explains that he wants to remember Artor as he was when he was alive, not sealed in a tomb. Maybe it's Ethan's conscience keeping him away, Kai suggests, and Ethan sighs with frustration. Look, brother, I will only be pushed so far, he says. Ashley looks at Elena. Different? Well, maybe she is different. Ashley has been fighting for the underground for so long, to the exclusion of anything else, that she isn't quite sure of who she is without that struggle. Being with Ethan is also a new development, and so that's a bit of an odd fit right now. If Ashley doesn't want to answer this question, Elena will understand, but she asks if Ashley is happy with Ethan. Meanwhile, Kai decks Ethan across the face. Is this far enough? He asks. Ethan wipes at his spit lip. If this is what you want. Kai moves into a fighting stance. It's what you deserve. Ethan dives into Kai, and the pair start wrestling. Ashley, meanwhile, sits down with Elena. She thinks that they are happy together, but maybe they don't know each other as well as they should, she says. They've been bouncing from one threat to another, and honestly, this trip is the first time that they have gotten to just exist with one another. It doesn't really seem like that's the best way to have a romance, she says. Elena looks at Ashley. Do you love him? Ashley looks down. They've never spoken of it. Ethan and Kai's fight takes them around the grove, and it finally ends when Kai tackles Ethan into one of the thin trees. It snaps, and they both fall to the ground. Ashley stands up, clearly a little bit uncomfortable with opening up to Elena. When they first met, she says she only saw Ethan as a potential ally. In fact, they kind of didn't get along at all. But it grew into more over time, and you know what? Yes, she does love him. But he's never said as much. Elena stands, resting a comforting hand on Ashley's shoulder. Ethan might not know how he feels. In fact, he might not even know that he is supposed to feel some kind of way at all. In Elena's experience, all men are really boys. Give him time to figure this out. She says that Ashley is good for Ethan, and she thinks that he's good for her too. Real love is a rare thing, but Elena thinks that they'll figure this out. Elena leans in and hugs Ashley. She will always be welcome here. Neither of them have a sister, but she'll be here for Ashley if she needs her. Ashley returns the hug and thanks Elena, smiling. Ethan climbs off of the fallen tree, staring down the scowling Kai. Look, he says, this has gone far enough. He never meant to harm the family or their country or Kai. He's only ever done what he thought was right. But he swears, if the family truly needs him, he will be there for them. He will always have Heron blood running in his veins. So how about they stop damaging things and put an end to this squabble? Ethan offers Kai his hand in peace. And Kai turns away. Well, consider it ended. Ethan is no longer welcome here. And he's no longer Kai's brother. Is it okay if I hate Kai? Because I think I kinda hate Kai. The next morning, Ethan and Ashley sail away from the palace. King Dane, Queen Mariella, and Princess Elena are the only ones present to watch them leave. Mariella notes that Ethan leaves them no more at peace than when he arrived. She's clearly worried about him, and Dane responds that such was his choice when he made this course. And she's like, well, you were rather harsh to him, dear. Your sudden reversal on the sanctuary was pretty jarring. Dane says that Ethan wields a great power, and he would prefer if he wielded that power for them. Then he looks at Mariella, adding that they shouldn't have let things get so bad between Ethan and Kai. Mariella blinks. But we discussed that, she says. We said that they should work this out themselves, right? Remember the discussion that they had last issue at the very end in the garden at night? Did we? Dane asks. Oh, right, we did. Sure, that was totally what we discussed. Mariella sighs. She'd hoped that this trip would bring Ethan closer to them, but she fears that they've only pushed him farther away. And yeah, I'd say that's an accurate read of things. We move to the boat as the sun sets, and we find our lovebirds lounging on the deck. Their heads are near each other, with their legs facing in opposite directions. Ethan had hoped that going home would fix everything, but it feels like he's just made things worse. You know, they could just run away, Ashley suggests. Just keep on sailing, leaving their families and responsibilities behind forever. What about that plan? Ethan smiles. It sounds great. But it also sounds like something that neither of them would actually do. He turns, his lips near Ashley's forehead. Honestly, as long as they're together, Ethan doesn't care where they are. You know, he hasn't said this before, but Ashley stops him, something catching her eyes. Hang on. She stands up, and Ethan joins her. A large ship is just offshore of the Sanctuary Isle, and roaring flames can be seen engulfing the city. Black smoke rises up into the darkening night sky. The Sanctuary Isle is under attack. So there's a weird thing about this issue that I want to point out before we move on. When we first see Ashley in this issue, she is wearing a dress that looks like something kind of out of Earth's actual history books. It's the first time that I've seen Ashley in anything that modest and non-revealing. And she is meeting her boyfriend's family formally for the first time, who are also royalty. So I get needing to dress nicely and wanting to impress and not, showing off your midriff and your deep cleavage. But after the dinner, when Elena goes to visit her, Ashley is dressed in a skirt that barely covers her butt, a leather top with straps that exposes her stomach, and boots, so she is showing a lot of skin. And while this is, in general, much more to Ashley's normal style, I also feel like it's an odd clothing choice to go for. Like, what, just because dinner went poorly you no longer need to dress conservatively? Why not dress the way you normally dress otherwise, especially if you're meeting people that you fear are going to judge you as a villain? Then just be yourself. You're either going to win them over or they're going to condemn you one way or the other. Pick one, go for it, own it, that's fine. This just seems like a super odd choice on the part of the art team for this book. And we've seen the art team do very clever things with clothing before, like when Ethan was leaning away from the Heron family and more towards the underground, we saw him shift from blues and whites and golds to more cream, stone-colored tones, something a little more neutral as opposed to Heron. Again, this is just an odd fit. It's not a bad thing, it's just weak I would say that it's weak artistic storytelling in the form of clothes. People choose what they wear, and this decision by Ashley is a weird one. Our art team, by the way, for this issue is Jim Fern, Don Hillsman II, and Jason Keith. Fern seems much more comfortable with Scion with this particular issue, though I would argue that his backgrounds are still, oddly disconnected from the people. And his people still feel a bit stiff, but they aren't that bad. They are an improvement over the previous issue. Ethan and Ashley are consistently drawn throughout, and the colors here look much better in general. The scenes between Ashley and Elena look especially nice, as does the coloring at the very end with the boat. The sunset there looks great as well. Most of the character beats here at the end are pretty familiar, and I would argue, pretty telegraphed at this point. Elena and Ashley have tried to chat with each other a few times before, and here they finally get a chance, and guess what? They get along pretty well. Ashley has spoken to Ethan a few times about how the only people they have in this world are each other, which is Ron Mars's way of saying that Ashley feels utterly alone. And given the background of her family, that makes a lot of sense. But now that Ashley is paired with Ethan, she kinda gets a second shot at having a family. And I dig that idea. And I dig that she finds some people who I guess you could consider allies in the form of Mariella and Elena. That's super clever. On the flip side of things, we have Ethan and Kai, who have had the wedge between them driven to golf-sized. Things get so bad that they end up destroying one of the trees in the grove, which is clearly meant to be a visual metaphor for their conflict. The tree stands for their family and happiness, and they are destroying it with this idiotic feud. I still don't quite pick up on Mariella's idea that Kai is hurt over the loss of Artor still, but we don't really get to understand his emotions here at all. We've never gotten to see a scene from Kai's perspective or hear his thoughts on Artor and the loss for it. And to be fair, Kai could be the kind of guy who doesn't ruminate on his feelings. That's clearly something that Ethan does, so he might not even understand why he feels this way. But it does leave me kinda hating Kai at the moment. It's really hard to have sympathy for a character that you don't ever get to understand at all. We also see Dane forget his discussion with Mariella from last issue, which is a pretty blatant hint that Dane isn't who he seems. We have seen Mai Shen assume the form of burned Rex before, so it is possible that she is running some kind of strategy here. It feels like this idea would be really coming out of left field if it is Mai Shen, but she is the only established threat that we have at the moment, and she's the only shapeshifter that I know of, so she's kind of a shoo-in. And while if that is the case, I think that's kind of telegraphed, I have to give Mai Shen credit. If destroying Ethan physically isn't really possible, then you crush him emotionally. That is not a bad idea. Issue 30 starts us off on the Sanctuary Isle and in the middle of a fight. Fires burn in the city, and blood flies from Exeter's axes as he holds firm. The Sanctuary inhabitants have rallied behind Exeter to repeat his strategy from the Raven's attempted invasion. Pick a road, blockade the rest, and defend the crap out of it. They might not be much of a fighting force, but they seem to have held their own pretty admirably. Dead men litter the ground at Exeter's feet, which is no big surprise, and he promises the pirates that if they want this island, they'll have to climb over a mountain of their own dead to claim it. We quickly cut to the leader of the Kamrani Brotherhood, this particular band of pirates, who is dressed in a very nice set of black and red clothing, golden gauntlets, and a shiny helmet. The rest of his forces feel very haphazard and slapped together in comparison. This guy is clearly in charge, and he is living large. He shouts encouragement to his men, establishing that they are hoping to use the island as a base of operations once they claim it. Their motivations now established, we return to Exeter just in time to see him saved by Nadia. He thanks her and reports that they're in pretty bad shape. The pirates are coming from everywhere, and they don't have nearly enough fighters to defend the island. Nadia asks what they should do, and Exeter thinks for a second. What can they do? Fall back to their fortified positions. He'll hold them here for as long as he can. As the rest of the Sanctuary forces fall back, the pirates press their advantage. One of them is stopped when he is attacked by a familiar face, Elijah, who is armed with a wooden staff. He says that he sacrificed too much to lose his new home now. He'll fight to the last. For all his spirit, though, Elijah isn't a seasoned or skilled fighter. The pirate ultimately gets the upper hand and is about to kill our boy when a glowing yellow sword pierces through his stomach. Ethan and Ashley have returned. They ask Elijah for a sit rep, and he explains that the pirates were just waiting out in the waters. They sailed into the harbor under a flag of truce, but when they came ashore, they attacked. But now that they're back, meaning Ethan and Ashley, they're saved. Ethan remains cautiously optimistic, though. They aren't saved yet. They head over to Exeter's location, which is where we then cut to, and we find Exeter throwing around pirates like they're sacks of rice. Skink spots our approaching main characters and points them out. He then asks how the visit home went, and man, that's some bad timing, Skink. Like, we've got a pirate attack to deal with? And Ethan responds that the trip home was horrible. But, they'll get into that later, because first, pirate attack. Exeter explains that the Kamrani Brotherhood called themselves freebooters, but they're more like thieves and murderers. And honestly, I've always seen freebooters as a synonym for pirate, and pirates were often thieves and murderers, so he is being really picky with his word definitions here, especially for a bounty hunter. He does explain their own efforts to defend the island, reporting that the Brotherhood is rallying for another attack. Right on cue, the Kamrani's leader shouts for his crew to press forward, and we get a big 2-page spread of everyone fighting chaotically. Unfortunately, for a 2-page spread, I think this one's kind of ugly. The Sanctuary forces do manage to beat back this wave, and the pirate captain orders his people to back up and regroup. They'll break through eventually, he promises. And Ethan agrees with that assessment. Eventually, the pirates will overwhelm the islanders. There just aren't enough of them. Ethan could probably defend the island indefinitely, thanks to his sigil, but how much damage would they take in the meantime? And who else among them would get hurt or killed? They just can't let this go on. Ethan hops atop their barricade, introduces himself, and asks to speak with the leader of the pirates, who is named Vindaj. They talk for a little bit, Ethan asking this dude's motivations, but Mars covered this for us earlier. He wants the island as a base. So Ethan offers him a deal. One-on-one combat, man-to-man, for possession of the island. Loser leaves forever. But Vindaj can see his glowing sword from here, and he doubts that any fight between them would be truly fair. Ethan does offer to use a blade of Vindaj's choosing, but Vindaj would rather choose his opponent, and he points at Ashley. And although Ethan protests this move, Ashley accepts the challenge. And so then he protests her accepting the challenge, and Ashley ain't having it. She has probably been in more battles than Ethan has, she says, and this is her home too. They took it together, and she will stand in its defense. And It's also not his place to decide for her what she does and doesn't do, Ashley adds as she hops over the barricade. Vindaj chucks his helmet off to the side, ready to fight. Not that he wants to. Killing a woman who is as beautiful as Ashley seems like such a waste. He would prefer that she be part of the spoils. Ashley dives forward at him, but Vindaj parries her blow. He appreciates her spirit, and now he's doubly sad for having to kill her. He manages to score a slice on her cheek, but it's superficial, don't worry folks. They go back and forth for a little bit, and Vindaj manages to land a punch on her face. Ashley falls back against the wooden barricade, and Vindaj presses his advantage, diving forward, hoping to end it. But Ashley rolls just to the side, and his sword sinks into the wood and is held fast. As he struggles to pull it back, Ashley drives her blade up and through his chest. The fight is over. Ashley tells the pirates to take their captain and leave, and they had best hold to his agreement and never come back. Ethan rushes to Ashley, wrapping her in a big hug while asking if she's okay. She was only scratched, she says, and he congratulates her on saving them all. But Ashley isn't celebrating. The pirates left this time, yes, but what if they didn't? And what if they come back? Not every opponent is going to agree to this kind of honor duel. It's clear to her that they're not safe here. Ethan agrees. They have been relying on his power to get them through pretty much everything, but he can't be everywhere all of the time. And what happens if he dies? Who defends the island then? No, she's right. They need a different solution. Which is when Nadia steps up and offers one. The scientific advances that Tigris has made could be quite the boon to their island nation. They could go to her homeland and bargain for the technology they need to defend the island. She suspects that her people would be open to such an agreement. Ethan looks at Ashley. What do you think? She frowns. They don't have a choice. He then turns to Exeter, effectively asking the big man to babysit the island again. And while Exeter isn't happy about having to do so, he will do it. Ethan asks Skink to stay with him since Nadia will have to go with them, and Skink is probably the wisest person that Ethan knows. Skink agrees to staying. Ethan doesn't need him looking over his shoulder all the time. So okay, Ethan finally looks back to Nadia. Then we'll leave tomorrow, and once we're done, nothing will threaten the Sanctuary Isle ever again. And Nadia just smiles. So I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't think this issue was very exciting at all. We repeat Exeter's strategy from issue 25, which was retreat behind fortifications and let him almost die defending those fortifications. When we check on everyone throughout the issue, we actually do it separately from Ethan, so we know that everyone is alive and well, and this drains any of the tension that this pirate attack has. I do like Ashley being the one who fights Vindaj, as she hasn't held her own in a while, so that is a pretty dope story decision. We also have a lot of repeating conversations here, on top of Exeter's repeating strategy. We have Elijah telling Ethan what happened. We have Exeter telling Ethan what happened. We have Vindaj telling Ethan why what has happened. Like, why do we do this 3 separate times? Why not just have us follow Ethan and Ashley into the fight and reveal this information as we go? Just pick up immediately where issue 29 ended and take us right into this one. This issue feels so, empty. It feels like fluff, and we've got a pirate attack happening here. This should be exciting. And I don't care much for, everything pretty much in regards to Nadia. We know that she is manipulating our cast, so this particular ending feels kind of sinister. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does undercut our hero's victory. And I feel like we needed a victory after the rather torturous visit to the Heron Palace. So that's more personally frustrating for me, I suppose. If you folks feel the same, feel free to let me know. It does fit Mars's general style of writing for Scion, though, having a moment of victory being tainted with personal failure or tragedy. We saw him do this back in issue 6, when the Herons won the Battle of Point Corday, but Ethan lost Artor, and then we saw it again in issue 16, when the cast destroyed Tyrus's lab. Mercy killing those lesser races was a good thing to do, but it was still killing innocent people in Ethan's eyes. And thus, again, it was more of a defeat than it was a win. And if we're going to have Nadia manipulate our cast, by the way, or at least claim to be manipulating our cast, then maybe we should actually have her manipulate stuff? Like, wouldn't it have been cool if she had contacted the pirates and gave them, like, the coordinates for the island, or told them, hey, it's undefended, or just something? Like, have her make the island be unsafe in order to drive the island into an alliance with Tigris. That would make her feel much more intelligent and even more sinister, and give her a sense of agency for herself. And since Mars is clearly setting her up for some kind of bad guy reveal, let's just own that
No swearing.
If you're gonna be bad, then be bad, baby. That was the best thing about Bron. Yeah, he was a jerk, but he was a jerk you could love to hate. Come on. The fact that we know that Nadia has a scheme up her sleeve is very irritating to me. I would much rather be in the dark about Nadia's motivations until the moment of actual betrayal. Ethan is our main point of contact, right? He is who we sympathize with the most, and normally we spend most of our time with him experiencing the world of Avalon. But after the reveal that Nadia has some kind of plan to take over the world, and Ethan and Ashley have a role in it, now we are oddly omniscient about his situation. We're oddly outside of it. Rather than experiencing this story as it unfolds with Ethan, now there's a distance there. We are watching this unfold to him, not with him, and I don't care much for that. Mars kind of did something similar with Bron when we saw his deepening relationship with Mai Shen, which led up to him getting superpowers. But in that situation, we needed to know that Bron was getting superpowers. If we had shown up to issues 12 and 13 without ever checking in on Bron, we would have been surprised at his powers, sure, and that would have been great, but then Mars would have needed to explain how Bron got them. This would have killed the story's momentum or necessitated a flashback, which would also serve to kill any forward momentum as well. So it was much more dramatic to do it the way that Mars did, and honestly, it was just easier to show us it happening as it happened. But here, Nadia still needs to reveal herself at some point. She's still going to need to explain what she's up to, at least to us, if not to the cast. So whatever tension and trauma the audience gets out of knowing about Nadia is really undercut by her failure to actually do anything interesting. I don't think that the pirate part of this issue is a bad idea. Like, I'm down for pirates in general. I think they're fun. They're great kind of characters to just throw in there and go for. But I really wish that Mars had done anything else with them. Vendage is presented to us as a little bit of a lecture. He is very open about his attraction to Ashley, which I gotta say makes sense. But Vendage takes up Ethan's offer for a duel. He's inspiring to his crew, and he clearly values them. Otherwise, they would have just continued to lay siege to the island's defenders. He accepts Ethan's offer partially, honestly, because he thinks that he can beat Ashley, but also because this spares his crew any further harm. So I can't quite bring myself to dislike Vendage in this. He's vaguely handsome. I hate his mustache, but, personal taste. He's pretty well dressed. He is oddly well behaved for a pirate. And rather than see him dead, I kind of wish that Mars had done more with him. The Kamrani want to use this island as a base, yes? So why not hire the Kamrani to act as a naval defense force? Ethan and Ashley could offer them the one thing that they actually have, a sanctuary, which is the one thing that the Kamrani want, and in return, they could defend the island, the one thing that the island needs right now. You could even have them engage in piracy against, let's say, the Raven Nations, which could acquire the Sanctuary Isle goods and supplies that they desperately need, while also harming the Raven Nation, wink wink, because ostensibly they are still bad guys, as far as our cast is concerned. This is something that used to happen in our own history. I believe that England and Spain used to hire pirates to harass the ships of the other nation just to kind of stick it in their eye and hurt their economy. Or maybe you could even have made the Kamrani be composed of the lesser races, which would have added an extra layer of drama. Like, maybe these are people who broke away from slavery and servitude, like, years ago, and so they see themselves as separate or above the rest of the lesser races. And then they show up here, and they hear about this group, and they're just cattle. They can't think for themselves, they can't fight for themselves, they're just weak targets. That would have been so much more interesting than just whatever this thing was that we got. Or even, what if you did this whole issue, but without Ethan and Ashley at all? Exeter could repeat his basic strategy, but this time, no reinforcements come to back him up, and he falls. He isn't killed, don't worry, I like Exeter too much to kill him, but it would keep him out of the fight. And then the Kamrani would take the island. Skink could encourage Nadia to escape, maybe he could even help her escape, and then the issue could end with Ethan and Ashley spotting the island like we saw at the end of our last issue, but then Nadia's rowing out on a small boat, and she tells them what happened. Ethan is all like, well, we'll retake the island, don't worry, but with the lesser races as hostages, Ethan can't just go full blast, he'll kill everyone. So Nadia pitches going to Tigris and forming an alliance, and that's what they would go do. This would add a whole new level of drama and tension to our visit to Tigris. And, given what's going to happen there, we would have a whole new set of motivations to drive Ethan and Ashley's upcoming decisions. Plus, back on the Sanctuary Isle, you could have a whole bunch of things happening and play with the lesser races, like maybe they start doubting Ethan's commitment because he went to the Heron Lands and then he hasn't shown up. Maybe they're being forced to be slaves again and being re-traumatized. They don't know if help is coming. Maybe that forces some of them to step up into rebellious leadership roles in the meantime. And on the side, we could see Skink nursing Exeter back to health. Maybe Exeter is even working to give direction to the rebellious faction leaders. Like, you could do a whole bunch of interesting things that further all of our characters' narratives that we haven't been seeing happen at all just because pirates show up. And instead we get pirates show up and they fight and they lose and they bleh. Clearly, I don't care much for this issue because I'm spitting alternate takes and I'm going to continue to go on a rant. All right. I do like Elijah showing up again. Anytime we see Elijah, there's a little thrill going to go off in my heart. And I like that he helped to defend the island, even if he wasn't very good at it. Like, you tried. You gave it your best. I'm glad you didn't die, but keep it up, man. You're gonna be great one day. I like Ashley being the one who ultimately saves the day, but the rest of this issue I could really honestly skip. The artwork, unfortunately, is as unremarkable as the writing is. This time around, Jim Fern is joined by inker Jennifer Cross and colorist Justin Thyme. The coloring works pretty well for the issue. There's nothing wrong or bad about it. It's fairly standard stuff, and it works fine. Fern's line work definitely looks different here, especially at the start of the issue. This is the kind of comic where you can really see the influence that an inker has over the pencils of a penciler. This issue looks very different from the last issue, which featured Jim Fern's line work, but inked by a different inker. Cross's inking is very crisp and heavy on details at the start of the issue. It looks like she put a lot of time into those opening pages. But as the issue goes on, and the deadline got closer, that attention to detail really fades away. And the pages here work fine, but honestly they aren't anything amazing. And in any other comic book, that might not be that bad of a thing. I probably wouldn't even notice all that much. But this book was drawn by Jim Mother-flooping Chung, and I have just come to expect more out of Scion. Dang it! Thankfully, our next 2 issues are both drawn by Chung, Hillsman II, and Jason Keith, so prepare yourself for some fantastic visuals. Gonna be nice. Next time, it's Villains Week. Mai Shen teleported a wounded Bron from the tournament arena, but where has he been since? Rotting in a ditch, like I hope? Or is he biding his time? And when Ethan and Ashley visit the land of Tigris, they find a threat beyond their imagining. Join me next week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 18.17 of Scion, Trapped.